Hey guys, what's going on? Just got Folsom Lake up here today. Thought we'd kind of talk about kind of some stuff to think about for the winter months as we're starting to kind of get into the swing of fall here and start to transition into winter. So yeah, I actually just got my boat quarantined yesterday at Mellow Marine, and I spent $120 to get that decontamination done, so I didn't have to wait the 30 days if you wanted to do the quarantine. And, they got me in and out. It was quick. I just made an appointment online, and it was pretty painless. I don't know about $120 for 20 minutes water being sprayed on my boat, but what do I know? So anyway, we got it done, and now we're going to start kind of coming out to Folsom. And kind of the way that I've been doing things the last 2 years or so is I've been spending a lot of time on the Delta during more later spring, summer, early fall. And then I've kind of been transitioning back to Folsom and then fishing out here during the winter months, throwing the Swimbait and kind of messing around with that whole thing. Kind of sucks now that I had to do this whole decontamination process, because now I'm not really going to have the opportunity to kind of float around, at least financially. I suppose I could go wherever I want and just decontaminate my boat for $120 every single time I want to come back to Folsom, but that's a little ridiculous. So I think we're just going to commit to staying out here. And I thought we'd kind of talk about kind of my approach the last 2 years or so and kind of what's worked for me, what hasn't worked for me. And then maybe some of you guys can try and apply that this winter. And, we're going to talk about definitely some more low-key things, but some of it's going to be left up to the imagination a little bit for you guys, but I think we'll at least get some good info out there to everybody. So generally speaking, and especially now that the water is low, I think it's 408 right now, and it's coming up, and I anticipate hopefully with continued rain, the lake's going to continue to rise and it'll continue to set up better and better as more structure and rocks and stuff start to get underneath the water. But, the lake's fishable at any water level, obviously. So mainly we have Granite Bay and we have Browns Ravine, and that's really all we have now. I don't know what their thoughts are for reopening Folsom Point or some of these other launches like Rat Bar or the Peninsula Campground, whatnot, but we're pretty much stuck with Browns and Granite Bay. And from kind of a Swimbait perspective, I kind of dabble. In my personal experience, I'm not like a swim baiter per se. I'm just a guy that throws swim baits and catches fish on them every once in a while. But I pretty much commit to the swim baits on the rainy and the stormy days for the most part. I've had luck on the swim bait on the days where it wasn't rainy and stormy, but it's been low light, or there's been other conditions. I personally haven't ever really caught any on super sunny, calm days or anything. That's usually when I'll just pick up the worm or whatnot and do some other stuff, the spoon, and just kind of have fun. But it really gets me jazzed up when we have those storms coming in, those rains, especially for Folsom. It just seems to be a thing for me. So one of the things that I pay attention to, and you guys are going to have to do on your own, is kind of start to figure out the trout plant schedule for Folsom. So obviously you can go on the, not DNR, but whatever, the fishing game website for the trout plants, and you could see the approximate window where they're going to dump them. That's public information. That's not hard to find. So what I like to do is I'll check there, periodically, and you can use either Sac County or you can use El Dorado County, and they'll show you whether they're going to dump them at Browns or Granite Bay. So maybe it's even Placer County, because they don't dump them at Folsom Point anymore, I don't think, with them shutting everything down. But basically what you need to do is you need to check on that, and then you need to come to the lake, obviously at least once a week during that time frame, to kind of get an idea of when they're going to dump those trout in. So, for example, I was just told by the guy at Browns today, actually, that they just planned 8,000 pounds of rainbows last week out here. And I hadn't had my boat deconned or anything yet, so I wasn't really in that headspace to even be throwing the swim bait yet. This is just more information I was told, but generally speaking, they'll just back straight down the boat ramp and they'll dump the trout right off of right off the ramp, just straight into the water. And in my experience, I feel like you have, I don't know, maybe definitely less than a week, but probably more like 2, 3, 4-ish days where those fish are going to be like, and by fish, I mean like the trout. The trout are going to be pretty much where they were planted. So like what I like to do is I'll come down, he's like, hey, I just planted them. Okay, great. And I'll kind of look, okay, which way is the wind blowing? Which way has the wind been blowing? Because the stalker trout are, I don't want to say they're stupid, but they're stupid. And they just kind of do whatever the wind tells them to do. So if I'm coming down here to Browns, historically speaking, they'll plant them. The wind likes to blow, southeast or whatever, and it'll kind of blow into this pocket. And a lot of times the trout will be kind of just in this general area. And it's kind of funny because I'll actually come out here with like friends, my dad, like whoever, people that like don't really catch a lot of fish, and we'll actually throw like little spinners from the shore, and you can actually catch these planters. I just throw them back, but it's pretty fun. You can catch a bunch of them, and by a bunch I mean like I've caught like 30 to 40 of them before at a time in just a matter of like 2 hours. And you'll see other dudes. That's another like telltale sign is if you don't know there's been a trout plant and you come down here and there's like 15 dudes lining the bank, probably a good sign that they planted trout. So I always like to kind of see where the wind is blowing, and that'll kind of give you an idea of where the trout are most likely being blown to. And I'd say that there's going to be like a kind of like a window like we've talked about in the past where there's going to be fish that are associated to this area because of the trout that have been planted. And I think we've talked about it in the past, but obviously Browns Ravine is a huge spawning cove. There's double-digit bass that live in here during the spring and the summer months and whatnot. And as the water level begins to drop, those fish get pushed out of this pocket quite legitimately because there's no water in it, and they're forced to pull out onto this like first, couple points or island tops or whatever. And maybe some of them go over to the peninsula. I don't know. Right. But they kind of linger in this area. So there's a pretty good chance that there's going to be some pretty big largemouth in this area. And now we have trout being planted. So now they don't really have a reason to move. So I like to target, this is where we're going to be a little more open-ended, but I like to target these types of areas. Right. And I've caught 2 fish over 8 pounds in very close proximity to this general area. And I do believe that those are fish that are associated to Browns Ravine that had pulled out into this general vicinity, and they wait essentially during the winter to move back in and then spawn. And they just don't ever leave. That's just what they do. And we could say the same thing over here at Granite Bay. This is a huge spawning area. Tons of fish come in here in the spring. I mean, it's probably top 5 spawning locations on the lake as far as just like massive flat cove area. I mean, it's perfect. So they also plant trout in this area. And depending on what we kind of do with the timeline up here, obviously it'll kind of change what it looks like. I'd say like some of the lower water, let's get a good image here. Lower water years will kind of give us a better idea of kind of the way it'll set up, because it is lower right now. 400's not super low. I think the lowest I fished the lake was like in the 370s a couple years back, but we'll just use this last one. So Granite Bay is a little bit more like iffy, because sometimes depending on what ramp's accessible, the trout truck will either dump them like off the normal ramp everybody else is using, but I've also seen them dump them off this ramp over here just away from people, because at the end of the day, like, fishing game doesn't want all these people coming and plucking all the planter trout and eating them. That kind of defeats the whole purpose of them putting them in the lake, because the goal is for them to hold over and, possibly, spawn again or at least get bigger, be in the lake for at least 10 minutes. Because if you're eating planter trout, I mean, you're essentially eating a fish that is like a farm-raised fish that was eating pellets like a week ago. So that's why a lot of these fish are so stupid. You can catch them on almost anything because they just don't know any better. And that's part of the reason why they get eaten so much, is because they just don't even know what's going on. So that's a little bit more up in the air. I feel like the Granite Bay area, in my experience, the fish have been kind of more like spread out, the bass and the trout. They don't like hold into a pocket as quickly as they do like over here on Browns, because it's just so much more natural, the shape of it, but they kind of spread out. But I've seen fish as far down here on Mooney Ridge. I've seen bass chasing trout after a plant. So that just shows you how fast those trout start to distribute through this area, and they just start getting eaten. And as we transition into those winter months and the lake starts to turn over and it does get colder, you're going to have trout that are just in the first 20 feet of the water column anyway, because of the temperature, not just planters, but just actual trout. So there's going to be bass that are relating to those fish as well. And when I kind of break down the lake in my experience, every big one that I've caught has been on the main body. Now, I'm absolutely not saying that you can't catch a big one in the river on a swim bait, because you absolutely can, and I've lost big ones in the river arms, whether it be the South Fork over here or the North Fork. But for whatever reason, everyone that I've hooked and landed has been on the main body and has been in some way related to these trout plants that we've kind of talked about. Now, when you have cold water, whether it be like up in the river arms of Folsom Lake or some of these inlets that start to get water as the rain progresses, there's going to be trout distributed throughout the entire lake. So I think your opportunities for the swim bait are great pretty much everywhere you go, but you kind of have different fish that are thinking different things. So obviously, like those fish that are near the boat ramps, I truly believe that those fish know that those trout are being planted, or at least those are larger fish that are associated to a spawning bay, and they're going to take advantage of what they see. And I kind of feel like, from what I've seen over the years out here, you kind of have two populations of fish. You have like isolated largemouth that are ginormous, like let's just say 8 plus, like 7, 8 plus, and then you have spotted bass that are usually in wolf packs. And you do have like these groups of like 3 to 5 pound largies that I feel like I've seen too, that they do associate with each other. And I think that they're more of like a pelagic fish that roams throughout the lake. And it's kind of funny to even say that, because you have fish, they're all the same like type of fish. Like it's largemouth bass, spotted bass, smallmouth bass, whatever it is, right? But I think that there's like isolated populations within the lake itself. Like you have your crawdads eaters, you have your bait fish eaters, you have your deep fish, you have your shallow fish, you have all these different types of fish. I think that there are trout eating fish that's what they do for whatever reason. Like I've seen wolf packs in the South Fork and the North Fork of big spots, like 6 and 7 pound spots. And I believe that they roam together for the sole purpose of eating trout. And it's almost like a pod of orcas or killer whales. Like they know that they have strength in numbers, and that's how they corral those fish. In the winter months, if you pay attention, there's a trout that's rising and that's like sipping something off the surface or doing whatever they do. And there's a trout that's trying to get away because they're going to get eaten. I've seen trout get eaten all over this lake. And I feel like it was almost something where I had to like really pay attention to what was happening to actually know that was happening. Like you might think like, oh, that was just a fish jumping or a fish splashing, but almost like some mackerel like running away from a tuna or something. That's what some of these planter trout look like, trying to get away from these largemouth and these spotted bass. And you'll start to notice that when you pay more attention to it. And to talk about baits just a little bit, I feel like the last 2 years I've just completely gotten away from like anything under like 9 inches. Pretty much like all I'm throwing is like 9, 10, and 11 inch baits. And I seem to have the best results with that. Now, granted, I do miss a lot of fish, and I really haven't figured that part out quite yet, especially with the spots, because a lot of them will headshot your bait, or they'll come up and kind of like tag it from the side. And a lot of what I'm throwing are soft baits in the winter months. So it's kind of just the nature of the beast. I will say that every like truly big bass that I have had eat the swim bait, I have hooked it. All the fish pretty much 8 plus that I've seen eat my bait, I have caught them because of just how ginormous they are. They just inhale the entire thing. But I have missed a lot of like 4 to 5 pound like largies and spots where like they tried to eat it some weird way, and you just don't hook them, and then you just cry after, and it is what it is. I don't really know if there's any remedy for it. It's kind of just the nature of the beast. But what I would pay attention to is like obviously your isolated rock piles, your long tapering points, areas like that where the fish kind of like have to swim around, just like any other type of bass fishing. Those are those areas where I feel like the swim bait has been the most effective. And I have caught some swim bait fish in 20, 25 feet of water, 30 feet of water. I have done it, but most of the ones that I've caught in have been shallow, like sub 10 feet probably. And I think it has to do with those fish are just, those are the big ones that are coming up to feed, and they're trying to pin those trout shallow, and they're not really eating them out in deep water. Not to say that you can't do that, but I haven't personally had that experience yet. So my plan of attack usually this time of year is I have, a handful of different baits that I throw, some that are more closer to the surface, some that are deeper, some that ride in the middle of the column. I'll have like 3 rods set up, and I kind of mess around with colors too. Everything's trout pattern for the most part, but some of them will be like ghosts, some of them will be more white. It just kind of depends. I don't even know how much it matters, to be honest with you. I just, like you just buy a bunch of stuff and that's what happens. But I feel like once the lake starts to stabilize, like elevation wise, like you start to get to more of a consistent elevation, you can start to kind of like pick out areas. And these are the areas where like you're going to have to find them yourself kind of thing, right? There are points on this lake where I have seen fish that I believe were between 8 and 10 pounds year after year after year. And I've caught fish on those points that were in that size class, right? So I cycle a lot of these spots year after year. Now, granted, I've only really been throwing the swim bait for maybe like three-ish years, like pretty dedicated, but I've started to notice these things. And I have spots at different water levels, right? As the lake continues to rise, there's areas that I have, and then as the lake gets lower, there's also areas I have. But the biggest thing that I've noticed is that you just really have to set up your mind for like what's reasonable, what should you expect. I would say like between December and like March time frame, and obviously you can still catch them into April and whatnot, and maybe even May. It just kind of depends. Maybe the glide bait starts to get a little bit better than the soft bait, but if I'm going out on like a true like stormy day, I got rain, like I got some nice like 6 to 7 mile an hour chop across the water, like I'm realistically looking for like probably 3-ish bites. And you're gonna have some like smaller fish mixed in, and that's kind of how I got to that number. Like if I can get about that amount, I feel pretty good about it. And usually one of them's going to be big, and that's kind of where it gets a little wonky. I mean, more often than not, you're going to have some crazy bites that you're going to see, opportunities, and I feel like it just is what it is. Like last year I caught that 9, and I had an 8 in January, so I got super lucky. I caught 2 big ones in a year. For me, that's like a really big deal. I'm sure there's guys that come out here and they catch a bunch that size, but for me, those 2 fish were awesome. That was a really big deal for me to get 2, and especially only 2 months apart. But that's what we're looking for. I mean, you'll catch a lot of like 3 and 4 pounders, and it's whatever. But like the reason that I'm committing to this during these winter months is like I want a double digit. I want a double digit, and I want a spotted bass like over 7 pounds. That's kind of like what I'm looking for in Folsom, and I think that's very attainable. I think you just have to be out there and willing to do it, and that's the hard part. So usually I kind of just cycle it on the days where it's sunny and whatever. A lot of times I'll just fish the worm and do some other stuff and kind of have fun. And then on the days where it gets rainy and the wind wants to blow, I double down. I say, okay, we're throwing the swim bait today, and like we're going to go for it all day long. And I'd say about, especially during the winter months, I mean, that's a lot of my trips. A lot of my trips are just throwing the swim bait throughout the winter. And I mean, pretty much the last 3 years, I've had one between 8 and 9 pounds, at least one. So that's what I'm looking for, and I'm still chasing a double. 2 of the ones I've caught, I really thought that they were going to go big, but they weren't filled out. No clear lake bass here in Folsom, but there's definitely double digits out here. It's possible. You just gotta stay after it. But yeah, I hope some of that helps you guys. If you guys want to come out here and give it a shot, I encourage you to do it, and don't give up, because sometimes you're gonna throw that thing all day long, and you're just gonna have a tiny little window where you're gonna hit a couple points, and it's just gonna be happening, and it's gonna make it all worth it. So wish you guys good luck, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.